Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. St. Louis University Muslim Students Association presents Fighting Temptations and Searching for Strength, a talk from the seminar Saving Our Deen by Brother Saad Quadri.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi wa kafa. Salamun ala ibadihi alladhina astafa. Amma ba'd, fa'udhu billahi min ash-shaytan ar-rajim. أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون ولقد فتنا الذين من قبلهم فليعلمن الله الذين صدقوا وليعلمن الكاذبين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. Yesterday, in both lectures that I had the opportunity to be involved in, we addressed the idea of relationships. And we addressed the idea of status. And one thing that we took, or I hope we took, was the reality that there are relationships that exist in this world. And those relationships are as we govern them. So what do I mean? For an individual, who has a position, for example, of being a student, that position's been granted to him from whatever the outside factors may be. But that title of being a student will be reflected based upon his or her effort. So you often see a teacher sometimes say, oh, that person's a student. Well, that's a student of mine. But now that's a student. The wording didn't change. The wording for student in that first example, in comparison to the second example, is the exact same thing. They're both students. But we see in the inflection of the teacher's voice, and perhaps in something in the teacher's eyes, that there's some message they're trying to relate about this person that is different than the other individual. So sure, yeah, this is a student of mine, but now that's a student, often means now this is a person who's taken his or her studies seriously, and as a result has impressed such a feeling on the heart of his or her teacher that they are now drawing that person in close to them, even though the wording remains the same. Even though the wording remains the same, they are now closer to that teacher than others. Or they hold a more favorable position to the teacher than others. Another example. If there's an individual who has many children, and parents love all of their children, but perhaps at one occasion, one child may do something, and so his father might say, oh my son, and those words, my son, may have much more love than on a previous occasion when the father uttered the exact same words. Although the wording is the same, from where the wording comes from, and from what is within the heart, causes there to be a distinguishment between how he referred to him as his son before, and on that specific day. So the idea is that we are all ibadullah. We are all the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether we choose to take this label with open arms and accept it and embody it and manifest those words within our actions, or we choose to run away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hoping that we are never caught, the reality is that we are all slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And just like a master may have various slaves under his control and power, or her control and power, there will be some slaves from that group who are individuals who serve that master day in and day out without any hesitation and do what is asked of them. And there are those who run away and are caught and are brought back, and who run away and who are caught and brought back, and who run away and who are caught and brought back. So the idea this weekend is not for us to discover what our label is, because our label will remain the same. And it's not to distinguish from ourselves one label to another, to say, I am a student, I am so-and-so, I am so-and-so. Rather, it is for us to accept the label that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has so endearingly given us, which is the label of His slaves. And that's strange to be said because as a teacher of the English language, I know when you use the word slave, it's a demeaning word. There's nothing endearing about the word. But the reality is that if a person in this world is a slave owner, then he claims possession over the life of that other individual. Just like an individual may claim possession over some of other possessions in their home which are not human. So on that level it may seem very disturbing. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen to make us His possession, then what that has done intrinsically for us is has given us an attachment to our Lord in a way that we could have only hoped from the beginning. Because there are some creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that are the creations of Allah, and that is their attachments. But there are some people, and there are some creations of Allah that are not only creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they are servants of Allah. Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given these individuals free will. And they have the opportunity to turn away and deny any request or directive or command given to them. Or they can be amongst those who do those actions. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانِ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ, that verily we have created mankind in the most perfect of forms. Then mankind has lowered himself to the lowest of the low. In this we see that man has the capability to become noble in front of the eyes of his Lord, or become degraded in front of the eyes of his Lord. And this actually goes back to the first talk from yesterday, which goes back to time. Because time is that distinguishing factor in which an individual begins to treasure those opportunities they have to turn to their Lord. Now, in this state of slavehood, we can be one of two people. Those who accept it. And my teacher, Shaykh Hussein, Dawat Barakatuh, was mentioning once in a tafsir that the word Muslim in the Arabic language actually has different meanings than what we are commonly used to. And so if you take an animal and you have that animal in the field, perhaps you have an ox, some animal in the field, and you choose to put over their shoulders and their neck that one contraption, and I'm forgetting the word, if you remember it, please remind me, that causes them to pull the plows. The animal could be of one or two types. The animal will fight against the master, turn its head back and forth, so eventually it's overwhelmed. Or the animal will merely just lower its head, realizing this is what it's supposed to do, allow the master to put over its shoulders that yoke. And when that yoke is placed, then go and carry on its task to the best of its ability. The first animal that fights will inevitably have the yoke put over it, sometimes by force, sometimes by the whip, and it will have to go on and continue plowing the fields. And the latter will also have to do the same, but it will not have to take the whip or harsh words or any force, and it will be able to go through it much easier, and in the end have more time to itself.